wanted to share a birthday present I got that's so big it doesn't really fit in frame. But it's the Fiskars ProCision rotary paper cutter. Let me just sort of show you this. This is sort of a first impression. So, like most of the rotary cutters, you basically got a carriage here that'll move on these two rails. The two rails keep it aligned so that you always cut straight. Similar to most Fiskars paper cutters, you get sort of the measurements on the right side of the blade, or left side, I guess, depending on how you have it set up. So it's easier to do. Let me just zoom in a little. Like, it makes it easier to do, and it's hard to, here we go. Like, because there are lines here, it's easier to do smaller cuts. And this whole thing does unfold. So you can do up to a 12 by 12. It actually goes to 13 inches, but basically it's capable of a 12 by 12 cut. And then we have rubber feet to keep it stable. It is, as you'd imagine, relatively heavy, so I don't know, it doesn't seem to really move around too much. You have a guard, much like, and then a lock if you want to lock the guard down for storage. But basically I got this primarily to deal with heavier weight stuff that didn't cut well in my smaller trimmers. So something like cardstock, I don't know that you would necessarily need to get this out for, but let's unlock this and, I don't know, do a basic cut. The nice thing is there are measurements in the middle too, so this actually makes it really easy to like line up. Let's say we want to cut 4 inches, and then you would line it up, bring this down, and either pull this towards you or push it away, ideally in a smooth motion. Kind of like, well, any other scissors. The smoother the motion, the cleaner the cut's going to be. So let's just try and cut this to 4 inches and see how it works. That was really smooth. The cut itself looks very clean, as I would expect. People have said that sort of the opposite side can sometimes get warped. So I guess we'll see that if we do something heavier. So cardstock works fine. We can just try, I have a little scrap of pattern paper. Let's say I want to cut, let's say I'm going to use the other guides and say, on the other side and say, hey, I would like a 1/2 inch piece. So a 1/2 inch would be the second line, so I'm just lining it up here, and then I'm just going to push up smoothly. And that seems to have cut perfectly fine. Don't see any difference between one side of this wasn't cut at all and the other was. Don't mind the fact this is warped, that was just me. So standard materials seems to work just fine. Again, things like the works have a bunch of additional features, so really I got this for dealing with heavyweight stuff. So let's grab a piece of chipboard, because this is sort of lighter weight chipboard. It didn't cut cleanly on any of my existing trimmers, so we'll see how this works. I use this primarily for shipping, but let's say we want to do a smaller piece of chipboard. Let's say we wanted to, this would potentially be good for backing things with, right? So you could measure over to the 1/2 inch mark. I'll put down the guard. I will take a look, and this one you can, the cut edge gets a little embossed, essentially. You can see it better on the back, or you can see how it's a very clean cut, right? But, I mean, you can see that this is a little, some material got bent down a little bit here. I don't think it would be a big deal to me, but if it's a big deal to you, obviously you could deal with that in a bunch of different ways. I would probably just take a sander to it. So let's say I want a 1/2 inch by 1 inch. Actually, this will cut a 1/2 by 1/2, but Well, we'll see. And then we'll just go over that, and then we have a very small piece of chipboard, which is what I really wanted this to cut. Looking at my ruler here, this is a 1/2 inch by 1 inch exactly. So this cut a pretty precise piece. Like you could use this, like you could use something like this to back a sentiment, basically, if you wanted to add more weight to it. And I think we may have even thicker chipboard somewhere, which I'm not seeing. Anyway, if I find thicker chipboard, I'll try it. I'll say very pleased with this. Obviously, it's a lot bigger than the other options, so it's probably something I would tend to like reserve for doing heavier materials. Glitter cardstock can be a pain to cut. Some of the more, like the really thick pattern papers. Oh, I know what would be good to cut. Let's grab a piece of my usual Bristol paper, which is 100 pounds. Technically 96, but like this one cuts in other paper cutters, but you have to be careful because it's easy to move around on you. Another thing to note with this, and like any other rotary machine, is the actual cutter needs to be at the top or the bottom for this to actually, for the guard to open. So let's say I want to, again, take off about an inch. I'm doing these small cuts because usually they're a lot harder, like sort of, like just cutting this in half has never been an issue, but I'm curious like how this feels. And like I didn't have, and again you have the same sort of debossing effect on the side you cut where it sort of bends this edge a little bit. You know, obviously you could use like a sand eraser or something to even that off. So the piece on the cut side tends to have that happen. The piece on the, like the side that's on the platform doesn't have that issue. So, you know, like if you were trimming, to use stuff on this side would be a lot nicer. But no issues cutting this. I think that's, yeah, it's less thick than the chipboard. So anyway, I'm liking this. This basically does what I wanted it to do, so I'm happy about that. Just lock this down. It's fairly safe, right? There's a blade in here that's self-sharpening, but you really can't get at it because it's manufactured into here. Like, you'd have to take this whole piece off to do that. But I really like the markings in the middle. I mean, that's basically a step up from any of my other paper cutters. Like, one of the things about the Works I noticed is because you don't have any lines marked because they're score lines on the actual platform. Like, you have to be pretty careful lining things up, but this would be a lot easier to line up. Because you can cut thicker things, in theory you can cut like multiple pieces at once. So maybe we could just try that, see how that works. So rather than using, say, one piece of cardstock, we could use two, which probably wouldn't be my preference, but because it sort of can get a little tricky to keep the pieces aligned, I would say. But anyway, we will sacrifice a panel briefly, and I'm curious how well the guard keeps that in place. Yeah, no issues. Obviously, there's a little more drag with multiple ones. The bottom piece tends to get that debossing, but this piece didn't at all. So I think potentially, like if you don't like that, stacking up pieces would be a way to potentially avoid that. So, anywho. That is initial first impressions. Very happy. Probably going to be more of my heavy duty cutter for 12 by 12 if I don't want to do that cutting on the Works, because I could see if I was doing a lot of, like if I was cutting a lot of pieces into quarter sheets, I'd probably definitely use this. It's somewhat easier to deal with than the other options I have. So anyway, happy to get it. Really happy to have something more heavy duty at the times it is called for.